Prior to that was born in Houston, Texas. Got his first job in newspapers in Nacogdoches, Texas, I believe, and spent a lot of time there before he came to Austin. But that's not why you're here. You're not here to hear about his career in the newspaper business. I was in the Air Force, and as a kid, I loved to read about all the different battles, and I came that close to thinking about a military career because I really liked to read about strategy and things like that. But I always remembered that as I read about those things, the thing that I would have least liked to have been a part of is what our speaker was a part of. And he's going to tell you about memories really of the first wave amphibious assault Marine Corps in World War II during the invasion of the islands of Okinawa and Guam. I also believe he was involved in the Marshall Island campaign as well. He was part of a five of six U.S. Marine divisions that were in the Pacific, fighting in the Pacific, he was in the 1st Armored Amphibious Battalion. Am I getting that right, Jim? He will talk about that and talk about a little bit of how that came about. He told me that there was kind of a bloodbath on Tarawa, and they began to change things and how the Marines went ashore. But still, to be part of the first wave anywhere is pretty amazing. One of my dearest friends, his dad was part of the first wave of Iwo Jima, and he is the only survivor in his group that went ashore in that first wave. So we have a tradition here, which for me as a speaker, that's what I do when I'm not practicing dentistry, is always a weird tradition in terms of a speaker. We stand and give a standing ovation to our speaker before they speak. I think we have a gentleman today in Jim Chandler who deserves a standing ovation even before he speaks, and I hope he gets another one afterwards. Jim, it's all yours. Please, sir. The podium is yours.
Thank you.
And we did pass out a handout that Jim's going to refer to. And oh, the last thing I want to do, if you have one of these blessings and curses we call cell phones, would you please turn them on inaudible? Thank you.
After that introduction, I think I want to go home. But I do appreciate it, and this is my first time to talk to a group about activities that we're going to be talking about, and so we'll find out how it turns out. This handout, I would like to go through it because there's a couple of things in there that you probably make it easier for you to understand. And this picture of this tank, this is the actual Navy photo of us going in on Okinawa. And then the other one is the 2 tanks that we used during the war, and then a map of the Pacific. The item, "I will know where to find you," was written by one of our lieutenants as he was going to be a speaker at one of our reunions, and he couldn't make it, so it wasn't given for several years, and he was going to make it again and couldn't make it, and he mailed it to the daughter of one of our members, and at the end of it, after all of these years, this was written years after he wrote the original part. And then because of this speech, one of our men's daughters adopted us, and she does our website, and she does a lot with reunions, and she's been a godsend. And she wrote the poem Echoes. And then I did the Invading Guam. And then the next one is one of our men, the Man of War was written by his daughter, and then I did Okinawa, and so the rest of it's okay. I think there may be an itinerary of our activities from the time we started. I went in summer of 43, and boot camp was really easy for me. I was just off the farm, and it made a lot of difference. And then I was assigned to the 1st Armored. It was a brand new unit that was being organized. And we're the only, to my knowledge, unit in the Marine Corps in World War II that was hand selected. When they sent the resumes out to our battalion commander, they sent twice as many as he needed. We were a real large battalion. We were 1,000 men, but we were self-sufficient. We had our own quartermaster, our own machines and machine shops, our own cooks and bakers. Everything that a division had, we had. We never camped with a division. We were always camped by ourselves. And so we had to build our own camps. And so they ran us ragged for a while. We left the States going for the Marshals. We were the first unit to be combat loaded when they left the States. So the next land I saw belonged to the Japanese. And halfway between the States and Hawaii, we ran into a storm that they hadn't seen one like it in about 50 years. We were transported by LSTs. They were flat bottom, and they rolled like this. And some of them rolled like that. And every of those tanks, on what we call the tank deck, the open area below, we could put 17 of these tanks. Well, every single one of them broke loose because we were rolling this way. Finally, we had to leave the convoy and head into the winds so that we could secure them. And this cost us, 1 man was crushed and killed, and 2 others were crushed and wounded real bad. And then the next thing we saw belonged to the Japanese. Our lieutenant that wrote that, "I Will Know Where to Find You," he had an almost impossible job assigned to him. His 6 tanks were spread out with their crews on 3 different LSTs. So you can imagine how communicating would be trying to keep something organized. But when we got to the Marshals, well, we were expecting the main invasion, and the day before they assigned us to go take 6 islands that were, you could wade from the main islands to these because they were going to use those islands for artillery, and they didn't want the Japs to move in during the night, so they gave us that job of securing those islands. The next morning then we got with the invasion group and went in with the first wave. The Marshals was a relatively small operation, but it secured some land for us that we needed. We left the Marshals and went to Guadalcanal, and we built our camp in a coconut grove. And the Guadalcanal is a beautiful, horrible island. The mean temperature is 115 degrees. When working, we got up early in the morning and we did all of our work before noon and quit because getting in those vehicles with the sun shining on it, you could fry an egg on them. So that was our almost daily routine, is getting up real early and doing the work. We were on the canal, we had about 3 months to get ready for Guam. And we loaded, they gave us almost a full company of the old 4th Marines off of Guadalcanal. And so with our company, the vehicles, the LSTs didn't have facilities for passengers. So they had about 500 Marines on one that had facilities for maybe 50. We were finding places to sleep wherever we could. And that bunch of 4th Marines were the meanest human beings that I've ever seen in my life. If you weren't one of them, you were a foreigner. It didn't make any difference if you were a Marine or not. And then on the way to Guam, well, one of those boys got a young Navy man, and the young Navy friend had the keys to the liquor locker. So they hauled a whole bunch of beer out, and about 25 of them got loaded and started fighting. Well, the skipper of the boat, he was young and inexperienced. He walked out on the bridge and yelled attention, and they kept fighting. So he walked back in and picked up a Thompson submachine gun and walked back out, and he was going to straighten them out. And the smartest man on the boat was the Negro cook. He picked up a water hose, he turned the water on, and you had Marines washing all over that deck. And then he called into the Admiral, and this is at the time that the Navy had to leave to go to Great American, or the Great Turkey Shoot. And so we were, because of the number of people we had, we could only have 2 meals a day, so we ran out of food. So we had to go to, I think, Eniwetok to get supplies. And this young naval commander called the Admiral, and he was going to court-martial a bunch of men. And our battalion commander came over and visited with him for a while, and then the Admiral got a call that, no, we don't want to court-martial these men. Now, going in on Guam, Guam was a fairly large operation. We had and we went in, there was you can see it on the map, there's a peninsula sticking out, Oroto, and that was the location of the Marine barracks. Well, 2 of our companies went in on the right, and 2 of them went in on the left. And where we went in, now we have 18 vehicles in each company, so we had 36 vehicles spread out along that beach. And where our position for that, where we ran in, there was a big rock pile, and our driver went over. And that's probably what saved us, because the 2 tanks on either side got hit. And I think the Japs thought that nothing could get over that rock pile, so we went over it. We went in 1,500 yards with the infantry, and we had the infantry, that first tank had a 37 millimeter cannon and a co-action 30 caliber, and then a 30 caliber up front for the radio operator, and then we had 2 wells behind the turret for 2 more 30 caliber, so we were pretty heavily armed. And we were up sort of above a group of Marines that got pinned down, and so we were trying to get them out. And this took 30 or 40 or 50 minutes, I guess. I don't remember exactly how long. And then one of the men in the back saw the company commander's tank slipped off into a 16-inch shell hole. So we pulled back. One of the men got out and hooked a cable to them, and we pulled them out, and we started moving back up. And you could have walked alongside that tank and put one hand on the tank and just about put your hand in shell holes where they were tracking us with 77s. And one of them exploded in front of us, and we went under the dirt that came down. It completely covered the turret, and I had to get out and clean that off because that covered my periscope, and that was the sighting. So it's amazing that we didn't lose more people than we did, because every inch of that island was plotted for, or zeroed in for artillery. And on the first night, our unit was on duty 24 hours a day. We supported the infantry during the day, and then at night we went to the beach and did beach defense. So our job at night was to keep them from coming around and going into back areas. And sometimes that was a kind of a ticklish operation, but we worked it out. And on the first day we were plenty busy. The second day things slowed down a tiny bit. And that's when but the first day in, after we got the captain's tank out, went back up and supported that, got that unit out, then we were out of ammunition. I fired almost 400 rounds of 37 and 6,000 rounds of 30 caliber. And then the 2 machine guns behind us had gotten rid of about 6,000 rounds. So we went back to the beach to get ammo, and found that the pillbox that was at that area had knocked out 5 of our tanks in an area not much larger than this building, and they had just cleaned it out. It took them 3 hours to get that pillbox cleaned out. So then we went back up, and a couple of mornings later, we were on a mission, and we went through the capital of Ghana, and I can never forget going through that. The sun's shining, most of the buildings are destroyed or gone or mostly gone, and there's a church with 2 walls and a cross, and the sun is, the background is shining through that cross. And then one morning, Maruska and I were sent on we had about 4 miles we had to go to take something to somebody, I don't remember what. Coming back, we were passing an Army officer's mess. A colonel came out and said, "You boys hungry?" And he said, "Come with me," and there wasn't any question about what he said. "Come with me." So he walked up and he pushed colonels and majors and lieutenant colonels, he pushed them all back. He said, "Back up and let these boys in." And he told the cooks, he said, "Get a mess kit for them and feed them." Well, that's what they did. They gave us the mess kit. We had all that good Army officer food. We went over and sat down, and we hadn't had anything to eat except K rations for a week. We took about 3 bites and we were full. And because of the way they defended the beaches on Guam, they hurt us pretty bad. But we left Guam and headed for back to Guadalcanal for our camp. And on the way back, we had a GQ. Well, we were working on the tank deck, some of us, and we headed to the hatch to get out. And just as we got up on the platform, well, that Navy young fellow was supposed to close that hatch. Well, he did, and he dogged it down. Well, on those, the dogs are on the outside. If you're on the inside, you stay till someone opens the door. So I didn't like that at all, being down there in the GQ. And when the GQ was over, well, I went to my company commander, and I told him what I was going to do. Told him we were on the deck to step through. There's 2 or 3 steps, and they closed that hatch. And I said, if that happens to me again, I'm turning a turret on that hatch, and I'm opening it up because I'm coming out. So the next time they had a GQ, well, they yelled, "Anybody on the tank deck want to get off?" So we worked it out okay. And then we went back to Guadalcanal, and they changed our mission. We got our replacements and all new equipment. And in addition to what we were supposed to be doing, they had the Marines had just about quit using 75mm ammunition, and they started using 105s. And so there was 75mm ammunition in stockpiles all over. So they gave us 82 tanks, I think it's 82, with 75mm howitzers, and they trained us for artillery, because at that time it took 6 hours about to get artillery ashore. We went in first. We could be set up and be firing in 15 minutes. And so when we got to Okinawa, that was one of our main missions. But on Okinawa, I can't describe. I went up, well, they woke us at 3 o'clock and fed us steak and eggs. And I went up topside just about daylight, and we were real close to the battleship Missouri. For 45,000 tons in 1945, that was a monster. Yeah. But looking out over that area, you couldn't see anything but ships. We had aircraft carriers of all kinds. We found out much later, we had 1,600 ships and 500,000 men for the Okinawa invasion. Most people don't know it, but that's a larger invasion than Normandy. And of the 500,000 combat troops, 500,000 men. We had 183,000 combat troops of Marines and Army. And when we got off the ship and started lining up, we were near the Missouri when he let go with those 16 inchers. Well, I tell you what, they'll lift you off the deck. And it was absolutely amazing. But when we were just, I guess, about the time we were getting off, we saw a kamikaze coming in. So the sky was full of planes, but this one was real low. He barely cleared that what we were on, but he was heading for the Missouri, and he was shot down before he got there. He didn't hit any ships. He just cartwheeled into the ocean. But we got our first taste of kamikazes, pretty early, and we got our guide boat lined up into waves, and going in, there were shellings, and the rocket boats were ahead of us, and they go in a certain distance, and the sky was just turned black with 5-inch rockets. And then the launchers were set at a certain, then they would move in so much farther and unload the rest of them. Well, there was an island there, and there was land there, but all you could see was smoke and fire and flames, and because the planes were bombing and strafing, and the battleships and cruisers were in, destroyers were in real close. It was, and then as we neared the beach, they lifted fire and let us go in. What we did not realize until we all were on the beach is the Japanese did not defend that beach that morning. So for us, it was a walk-in, and for everybody else. And our objective for that was to take and secure Yantan Airfield, and it had to be secured by noon. We had it secured by 9 a.m. Then we stood by most of the day waiting for the Army to come in to take over, and we had one casualty. A boy by the name of Perkins was standing on a tank, and a sniper shot him in the leg, and the fall off the tank was a whole lot worse than the shot he got in his leg. That was our only casualty that day in 4B Company. We've moved up started moving north the next day, and one of our sergeants was with me in the turret, and if he saw a building that he wanted to take it out, he'd fire 4 or 5 rounds of 50 caliber, so I'd get exactly the right building, and then I'd fire one shot with a 75, and those houses weren't too well built. We'd take them out. We did that for most of the morning, and about halfway through the morning, he grunted and he said, "Oh, I got hit." And he got hit in the side, but we think it was shrapnel, but it wasn't very bad, and I don't think he ever turned in for it. But we moved up over several miles over 3 or 4 days, and the lines up there were not really definite. It was, you could run into some here, you could run into some here, but there's no real definite lines. And we were in this valley, and it was at the end of the valley, the hills were like this, with a narrow bottom and a road going up it, and our maps were useless. They were absolutely useless. So our company commander wanted to know what was up that valley, so he asked for 10 volunteers. And I volunteered. And so he told the corporal taking us in, he said, "Now don't go more than 600 yards. And so we went in 600 yards. We went in another 600. We went in quite a bit more than a mile. And the road split and went around a pile of rock that had a house on top of it. And so Jones and I went up to check that house out, and they split to go around it. And Jones was laying down behind a little rock wall, and this house had a thatched roof. It came down to about here. And I was standing up looking out from under that thatched roof because we could see the Japs up on that ridge. And about that time, the whole side of that building erupted in machine gun fire. My feet went out from under me backwards, and I hit flat on my stomach. And Jones, you hurt? I said, no, I don't think so. And so we got the group together and we leapfrogged back out. And the Japs were running a ridge up ahead of us, up on top of it, over us, trying to get ahead of us. And we stayed even with them. And so as each one in the back was waiting for the group to go by, well, mostly that was the one that was firing. But we ended up getting back with absolutely nobody got hit.
Amazing.
And we came out of that one pretty lucky. Then we had, along with all of our work at day and stuff at night, we had a group that decided to go souvenir hunting. And that was a no-no. And they lost one of our men. The next morning, we had about 100 men, and the company commander went with us. And I decided that I wasn't going to take an M1 with me that morning. I was going to take something else. So I had a heavy, heavy asbestos glove that I laid on my arm, and I picked up a Browning .30 caliber machine gun. And I hauled that thing all day. But I'd cut a belt, about half of a belt of ammo, and sling it over my shoulder. And we got up on a ridge, and we were in the area where they lost that boy, and we couldn't find a thing in the world that would indicate that they'd even been there. But we were, Pocius was laying with me, and we were laying shoulder to shoulder, and the Japs were across that valley. We were firing at him, and he said, and I looked at him, and he's touching my shoulder with his. Well, right here, he got hit, and he went in by the bone and out under the shoulder blade. And so about that time, well, we had 4 hours of looking for, and the company commander decided that we'd go on back in. So we got Pocius off the ridge and went back to campground. And then I was never cussed, but 2 times in the Marine Corps by an officer. But while we were in that valley, I decided after I got off guard duty about 2 o'clock in the morning that I was going to make me some hot chocolate. So I pulled a blanket up over the foxhole, and I had a gasoline stove, that round one that everybody used. Normally it would kind of flare like that and then go back to a blue flame and you couldn't see it. Well, the platoon lieutenant must have been outside for some reason at 2 o'clock in the morning, and just at daylight I heard, "Chandler!" And I threw that cover back and I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "What were you doing building a fire last night?" I said, "Well, sir, I wanted some hot chocolate." Hot chocolate? Hot chocolate? What do you mean, hot chocolate? And then he started cussing. And this is a man that I had never heard say a bad word. And when he finished, I learned a few. And he ended up with, "If you ever do anything like that again, I'll kill you myself." So everything wasn't bad. And then we went to, we've been on about, I guess 5 weeks. And they pulled us back for a posted field of 3 or 4 days, and they camped us by an Army food dump. Now, we've been on K rations for 6 weeks. And that Army food dump, stacked as high as you could see in boxes like this, 10-in-1 rations, cans of bacon, cans of ham, cans of beans, cans of, you can't imagine what they had in those boxes. Well, we made up a work party of 100 men, and one of our sergeants took us in, and we walked out with 200 cases of the, I mean, this was Delmonico food. About 30 minutes, a little second lieutenant came roaring over, and, "Where's your commanding officer? Y'all stole rations from the Army." And we said, "Captain Carlson's over there." Well, he went over and he roared at Captain Carlson and says, "He's the second lieutenant." Captain said, "Put him in his place first." And then he told him, he said, "Now, this is our campground. He says, you look anywhere you want to, search anywhere you want to, and if you find anything that belongs to the Army, you come back and tell me. Well, we got ashore. It was a night that you never will forget. And we got out of that, and one man got a scratch from a piece of shrapnel, and there was a unit 30, 40 yards behind us that was screaming corpsman all night long. And we don't know what happened and what was the difference, that being that close together, that we got out and they got hurt so bad. And when we finished, well, I'd like to tell you some of the stuff at the end of the war, which was awful, but we went to Saipan, and the Navy came in and briefed us on operation. We'd never been briefed ashore before, always aboard ship where you couldn't send a message to somebody. And it was high stuff came in, though. I mean, they had that heavy stuff on their shoulders. There's no junior grade officers. And they told us that we had been selected to be the first wave in the southern islands, that we were going in to test the defenses on the first invasion that they could expect on the main invasion in March. And the first invasion was for November 1. They said that we anticipate the loss of the entire first 3 waves, which is 150,000 men. And he said, you are 100% expendable.
Oh, thank you for that.
That was a hard meeting to forget. Well, all of our equipment was aboard ship, and we got a 48-hour hold on boarding, and that's when they dropped the first atomic bomb.
Wow.
So there's, I think one thing that came out of the archives, Operation, it was what they found after they got the surrender found in Japan. They thought that the Japanese Air Force was gone. Well, come to find out, scattered all over that island, they had 12,000 planes. 2,000 of them, or 2,500 of them, had been designated as kamikazes. The others were bombers, and they were going to send waves of them out and get the troop carriers and whatever they could, the aircraft carriers, anything that they could hit, but 50 miles offshore. Anything that got in close to shore, the civilians had been trained, and if you didn't have a gun, you had a sharpened bamboo spear. They had divers, or rather scuba divers, with explosive packs that when the landing craft came in, they'd be out there to blow them up.